Listen up. You should never go alone in the North Cascades or in any national forest. And on August 1st, 2018, Samantha Sayers learned that lesson the hard way. On that day, Sam set out to conquer one of the most majestic peaks in the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest. And 2 days before the hike, Sam posted on Facebook. She wrote that she would be tackling Vesper Peak in just a few short days. Now, Vesper Peak is known for its technical scrambly sections, alpine conditions, and, of course, iconic views of the North Cascades and all around them, right? The hike is about 8 miles total with more than 4,000 feet of elevation gain. In her Facebook post, Sam warned that it was, quote, not a beginner's hike, but she still extended an invite to anyone who saw the post and wanted to tag along. In the moment, it read like Sam was sending out an open invite for her friends to join her in her favorite place on Earth, the great outdoors. But looking back, that fateful Facebook post now reads a lot more like a mysterious first clue. Samantha Sam Sayers was 28 years old, around 5'8", and roughly 125 pounds, and she was born for big adventures. She also had a very distinct look due to her alopecia, which is an autoimmune condition that causes hair loss. Now, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with alopecia, but just in case you're not, you'll definitely remember that time Will Smith attacked Chris Rock at the Oscars.
Oh, wow!
And that moment was so insane and viral that you might have forgotten that Will Smith did that because Chris Rock had made an off-color joke about his wife's shaved head, which was shaved due to her alopecia. That moment really stuck with me, and I've really sympathized with folks that have alopecia, and it's only partially because the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air gave me some very good reasons to do so. But back to Sam, instead of hiding her condition, she embraced it. She shaved her head, and she proudly got a set of stars tattooed around it that her mother actually designed. It paired well with her piercings, too. Sam studied theater in New York and then moved across the country to Seattle to make just enough money to adventure in the Pacific Northwest wilderness as much as she possibly could. In Seattle, Sam started dating a New Orleans transplant named Kevin Dares. Now, the two of them had originally matched on Tinder and then chatted for a bit, but in classic dating app fashion, nothing really came of it. Now, some people might call that a textbook case of ghosting. And oh, while we're on the subject, please don't ghost me. Hit that subscribe button right now, especially if you're a repeat viewer. It's totally free, and you'll be helping us reach our goal of 1 million subscribers. We're getting close. Now, Sam and Kevin definitely defied all the stereotypes of ghosting and dating apps. Even though after they first matched, they ended up kind of losing contact, they did kind of randomly find themselves at the same Mardi Gras party in February of 2016. And folks, that's when the romance finally clicked. They bonded over their love for the outdoors, but it was always clear that Sam had a different level of hunger for chasing higher and higher peaks. And yet, they loved each other all the same. Neither of them knew it at the time, but reuniting at that random party would eventually change both of their lives forever. In Sam's Facebook post on July 30th, 2018, she warned that she might not be back from her Vesper Peak hike until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. She added that she still had 3 spots left in her tiny blue Ford Fiesta, but no one ever took her up on the invitation, and Kevin had to work that day, and so he couldn't go. And because of all that, Sam would plan to hike all by herself, which is another decision that would change her life forever, too. On August 1st, 2018, Sam left her apartment around 8 in the morning. Kevin actually texted her that morning to be careful and to send him an SOS if anything went wrong. And to that, Sam replied, quote, "Okay, baby, I love you." This was a thoughtful text exchange, a very normal one, you know, not unlike any simple good morning and good night texts that they would trade back and forth through their whole relationship, as a lot of us do with our significant others, right? And I think most of us certainly see these kind of exchanges via text as just, you know, simple ways to show each other that we care. But this particular I love you text was a little bit different than all of the rest because, as it turns out, that text would be the last one that Kevin ever received from Sam's phone. And with that said, folks, this story is about to get extremely dark, and also weirdly controversial. You're going to understand what I mean. And so before we go there, I'd like to lighten the mood for just a moment and tell you about Mint Mobile. They're the sponsor of this video, and let me just say, switching to Mint was one of the easiest decisions that I've ever made, right? Mint Mobile completely reimagined the wireless shopping experience, and they put it all online. I'm talking no stores, no pushy salespeople, and no weird people with clipboards asking for your social security number while you're just trying to stand in line and buy a pretzel at the mall, right? It takes just a few minutes to sign up and activate with an eSIM, and you can do it right from your couch. Mint Mobile's plans start at $15 a month when you grab one of their 3-month introductory plans. And by the way, you're not getting some watered down version of cell service either. We're talking premium wireless on the nation's largest 5G network. I mean, I get coverage basically everywhere I go, whether it's on the trail, in the mountains, or sitting in my car outside of Taco Bell using their Wi-Fi for reasons I will not explain. All of Mint's plans include unlimited talk and text, plus free calling to Mexico, Canada, and the UK. So if I vanish on one of these adventures, at least I can phone home before my story becomes the subject of another Kyle Hates Hiking video. You can go with 5 gigabytes, 15 gigabytes, 20 gigabytes, or unlimited. And so you're not going to be stuck paying for data that you never use. And if you like saving money, by the way, Mint even brought the idea of buying in bulk to wireless. And so the more months you buy up front, whether it's 3, 6, or 12, the more you're going to save. So if you're ready to stop overpaying for wireless, check out the link below. New customers can get Mint's premium wireless plan starting at $15 a month on a 3-month plan, which is an amazing deal. And so click that link and you'll also be supporting the channel in the process. All right, so the fun's over. We need to get back to this very, very crazy story. So Sam's on her way to the hike, right? She proceeded to drive to the Sunrise Mine trailhead, and she signed the trail register sometime between 10 and 10:30 in the morning. It was a hot August day already by this point. Wildfire haze clouded the ridgelines in the distance, and hikers later remembered seeing the bald woman with the tattooed head and trekking poles. She was wearing a sports bra and gray pants, stripped down for the heat, and she carried a dark backpack. And frankly, all of those things made her pretty hard to forget. Sam had hiked this trail plenty of times before, and she clearly knew her way around the Washington wilderness. Now, let me tell you about Vesper Peak a little bit. The route to it is no joke. I haven't done it, but researching this, it's crazy. Now, first of all, again, this was in August, but as a lot of you know, any time of year, mountains can have slick rocks, even snowier conditions, and of course, unpredictable weather, especially as you get closer to the top. Now, the first stretch of the hike hides under forest canopy. The trail crosses a boulder hopping creek, and then switchbacks into a place called Wirtz Basin, which is a stone amphitheater that appears to be a dead end until you start to see the scramble towards Headley Pass. From the pass, it traverses to the tiny green bowl of Lake Elan, and then comes the last push up to the actual peak. Now, this is not a perfectly marked trail, and so it's kind of like a choose your own scramble over large blocks of granite, right? And for strong hikers, that final pitch usually feels a bit like being a kid again, back on the playground or more specifically the jungle gym. But for everyone else, this is where the mountain makes it abundantly clear who's in charge. Multiple people placed Sam at or near the summit between 2 and 3 p.m. One hiker remembered seeing her sitting and enjoying a sandwich while kind of chilling with some other hikers that were up there. Another witness said that he had lunch with Sam near the top, and later, from a distance, we'll say, this witness saw a woman that he believed was Sam heading towards Spada Lake, which is on the west side. And this is a problem because the route towards Spada Lake is not on the normal route that hikers take while they're descending Vesper Peak. It's not towards Sam's car. But by the time this witness realized that Sam was taking an unusual route, she was too far away to do anything. And then another hiker told the sheriff that he saw Sam coming down from the top towards the southwest aspect of the mountain right around 3 p.m., which is a little bit weird because that's also the opposite direction of the standard descent. This hiker remembered feeling worried, even then, before anything had gone wrong, feeling worried that Sam wasn't taking a very safe route down the mountain. And based on these reports, we know that Sam was up there at the top, and she was seen by tons of folks on this hike, but we also know that she wasn't really acting normal, at least in terms of her decision making. Either she was trying to spice things up because she had hiked this route a lot before, or maybe something stranger happened, and I really don't know what that is. Now, back in Seattle, Kevin Sam's boyfriend, well, he expected to get another text from her by around 6 p.m., which is, again, similar to the timeline that she put in her Facebook post. But 6 o'clock came and went, and Kevin never received that text message. And that was the first red flag. He waited for another hour or so, getting a little bit more anxious with each passing minute. And when he just couldn't handle this fear anymore, he decided to call Sam. But to his horror, the call went straight to voicemail. And that, of course, was red flag number 2. But I do have to be fair here, guys. Most of the trail that Sam was hiking didn't really have cell coverage. And so it wasn't completely abnormal that Kevin wouldn't, be able to reach her. But Kevin was still concerned because he also knew that there were scattered, patchy spots of cell reception on Vesper Peak where in the past he could sometimes get a hold of her. And so his instincts were just firing off. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong at this point. And so rather than waiting for a third red flag, Kevin sprang into action. He didn't call the authorities at this point. Instead, he decided to take matters into his own hands and go straight to the trailhead to see if he could get some answers for himself. And when he arrived there around 10 p.m., Sam's blue Ford Fiesta was still sitting in the dark parking lot. Kevin had bought a flashlight on his drive over, and so he fired it up, and he began hiking this trail all alone, illuminated by this kind of cheap flashlight, right? He pushed towards Lake Elan, kind of scrambling in the darkness. And again, we talked a lot about how this wasn't a beginner's hike. And frankly, it sounds even harder to do when it's pitch black and you're kind of panicked, like in a hurry. So while Kevin was rushing up the trail, he suddenly slipped and he smashed the flashlight against a slab of rock. The flashlight was useless after this. And so Kevin tried to use his phone's flashlight after this, but it wasn't really bright enough for the rocks above. And so Kevin had to turn around and conserve what was left of his phone battery to dimly illuminate the 3.5 demoralizing miles back to his car. He was sure that Sam was still out there, just out of reach, and now he had no way of finding her himself. When Kevin finally got back to the trailhead, Sam's car was still sitting there completely untouched. And of course, at this point, Kevin knew that it was finally time to call someone, but remember, the cell service is spotty as hell on this mountain, especially at the lower elevations, down at the trailhead. And so Kevin had to get into his car and drive. He didn't know how far he'd have to go before he could finally call it. And again, every single second matters in a situation like this. But thankfully, in a stroke of what was literally the only luck he had on this night, Kevin would end up passing a ranger station, which was one of the last places that still had a working payphone. There's still no cell phone service here, right? And so using that phone, sometime after 1:30 in the morning, Kevin was finally able to dial 911. And that's a call that none of us ever want to make, right? For some reason, whenever I'm researching these stories, just the part where the loved one has to call the authorities and tell them that someone's missing, I don't know. Just imagine having to do that for your significant other, for instance. That's terrible. And obviously, Kevin hated to admit this to himself, but there was nothing else that he could do, right? And so at this point, Sam Sayers was officially declared missing. Snohomish County Search and Rescue Sergeant John Q. Adams met Kevin at the ranger station. This was Adams' first year running wilderness search and rescue, and up to that point, he had taken plenty of calls that resolved themselves overnight, along with a handful of calls that didn't. And when he saw the crushed look on Kevin's face, he almost immediately knew that this was going to be the second kind of call. He gave Kevin some food, a helmet, a headlamp, and then began waking people up. And I'm talking about volunteers, mountain rescue climbers, and the helicopter crew. He told his deputy that they would throw everything they had at Sam's disappearance. And when dawn finally rolled around, that is exactly what they did. On August 2nd, teams fanned out from the trailhead. They swept the creek for tracks, they studied the ground for footprints, and they called Sam's name out into the woods. Snowhawk 1 lifted off with a forward-looking infrared camera mounted beneath the fuselage. Its pilots leaned into doorways to search along cliff bands and benches where heat signatures might hide. And through a nearby wildfire haze, they did see a tree that was on fire, but they didn't see Sam. As soon as the search started, Kevin quickly posted on Facebook about Sam's disappearance. He even created a Facebook group dedicated to her, and he also started a GoFundMe, which would eventually raise $60,000. As the story gained more and more attention, one thing became crystal clear, which was that the public really wanted to find Sam Sayers. But that would be no easy task. To understand why all of this was so difficult, you really just have to understand the terrain of Vesper Peak. Again, it's mostly steep and scrambly, and its north face is actually just a cliff. And then at the base of the cliff, there's some unmelted ice that every summer forms into a treacherous seasonal moat. And to make matters worse, as if we need to do that, this area is also peppered with old mine shafts that are hidden by brush. And so people began to wonder if Sam had slipped into either this moat or one of those mine shafts. But there was just no way for search and rescue teams to safely enter every single pitch black crack in the mountain without risking another tragedy. Over the weekend, the search grew bigger and bigger. Everett Mountain Rescue sent out experienced climbers who all knew Vesper Peak like the back of their hands. More search and rescue units arrived from multiple counties all over the state. Clearly, this was an all hands on deck kind of search. Everyone involved knew that the North Cascades were not the kind of place you mess around, and they also knew that time was going to be the difference in this desperate search for Sam. And then, on August 4th, 3 days into the frantic search, something unbelievable happened. You see, they had an Air Force unit monitoring Sam's cell phone number just in case it somehow came back online or somehow pinged on a tower that could lead them to her, right? And on August 4th, they finally managed to get a signal from her phone. But it was definitely not what they expected. This Air Force unit reported a cell ping coming from Belltown, which was the Seattle neighborhood near the apartment that Sam shared with Kevin. This, of course, left crews dumbfounded. For a brief moment, they wondered if they should even be relieved, because maybe Sam had somehow made it off the trail, found a ride back home, and then, plugged her phone in. Maybe it had died or something. Maybe this was a miracle, but at the same time, it kind of sounded impossible. Like, how could they have been spending all this time and energy searching for her along the trail to Vesper Peak while she was actually 75 miles away, just south of the Space Needle? They needed answers fast. And so Seattle PD went to the address of this cell phone ping. And as it turns out, this ping hadn't been from Sam's phone at all. It actually came from Kevin's mother's phone. I guess in like a desperate attempt to access some of Sam's account data, she had worked with the cell phone company to clone Sam's SIM signature on her device, and then the network somehow pinged from this clone. Folks, it was nothing but a false alarm. The ping had caused hope, fear, and a lot of confusion all at once, but for a moment, it was at least a lead that they had all prayed for, and now it was nothing. But despite this, false hope, I guess, the search didn't slow down. Divers dropped into Lake Eland to search the bottom. Volunteers started caching Ziploc bags that had ponchos, socks, energy bars, and notes that said, "Stay strong, we're looking for you." They cached these bags in the hope that if Sam was kind of moving at night, she might be able to, find one of these caches and then use the supplies to survive. But despite these efforts, nobody found a dropped phone, a hiking pole, or any scrap of gear. They found absolutely nothing. And after 22 days, and one of the longest searches of its kind in Washington state history, the county suspended operations. They had burned through time, a lot of money, and risked the lives of a lot of people, and still there was no trace of Sam. Absolutely nothing. Now, folks, the story of most disappearances would probably end here, but this one doesn't. Despite the official search being called off, Kevin, Sam's boyfriend, he refused to give up. That very same morning, he launched what would become a massive private effort. Kevin reached out to a nonprofit founder from Minnesota named David Francis. David Francis's son had vanished in the wilderness in 2006, and he would take that heartbreak and turn it into a life of helping families navigate the exact same thing. Francis flew to Seattle to organize the unofficial search, and his first piece of advice to Kevin was very simple. He told Kevin to call a man named Bud Carr. Now, Bud Carr was a survivalist and self-taught searcher with a military mindset and what some would describe as a sketchy past. He's lean, he's tattooed, he sometimes sports a mohawk, he smokes American Spirit cigarettes, and he dresses in military camo. Bud Carr did spend some time in prison for a felony gun store burglary when he was only 19 years old, but he would end up finding Buddhism after he was released, and from that point on, he devoted his life to service. I'm telling you all, this guy is one of the most colorful characters that exists in the search and rescue world, but at the same time, to a lot of people, Bud Carr is just the kind of guy that gets stuff done, right? Bud has searched for numerous families' missing loved ones, and despite his work ethic and even some of his results, which we're going to talk about in a second, he has made some enemies in the process. Critics accuse him of self-promotion and dangerous theatrics, but his supporters say that he shows up when everyone else has already gone home, which makes sense because, again, he's the guy that doesn't give up. And so with Bud's help, Kevin started covering his apartment walls with maps of Vesper Peak. They tracked moon phases and water sources, and they asked Kevin's father, who was the command chief warrant officer of the Louisiana National Guard, to run the new base camp. They even gave the whole program a name, which was Operation Relentless Pursuit. And look, that name might seem a little goofy and maybe a little overly dramatic, but I gotta say, I just got done reading a book about World War II, and wow, there were some insane operation names in there. Like, get a load of this. Operation Mincemeat, Operation Toenails, and even one called Operation Chattanooga Choo Choo that involved the Allies sabotaging German railways. So I guess it goes to show that it doesn't really matter how wild your operation name is, as long as the operation itself is a success, and that's precisely what Bud and Kevin hoped for Operation Relentless Pursuit. They brought in private helicopters, drones, and even a tracker. They crawled into gullies that even seasoned climbers wouldn't go near. They fought government agencies for access, and they begged obsessed internet strangers for a little bit of patience, right? Bud posted videos that made many search and rescue veterans roll their eyes, but also at the same time made some families feel, at last, that someone was speaking up on their behalf. Kevin and Bud worked tirelessly until the snow finally started pounding the mountain, hiding any evidence that might have been out there. It's now mid-October, and unfortunately at this point, winter forced the operation to kind of wind down. From friends to family to everyone in between, people were desperate for answers and running through every possible scenario to answer the question, where the hell was Sam Sayers? I mean, did she have some kind of crazy accident out there in the wild? That's certainly the first question that most people thought. I mean, she was at or near the summit between 2 and 3 p.m., and credible witnesses said that she headed off the southwest side or possibly towards Spada Lake. Did she slip on some hard snow or slide over some slick rocks, or did she take a wrong step and land into a fast-moving creek? Both the official and unofficial operations searched tons and tons of ground in the area, but ultimately, you can spend 22 days and thousands of hours searching and still miss the 10 yards that really matter, right? They easily could have missed the one spot where Sam had fallen in this vast wilderness. And I know that's not satisfying, but it is the harsh truth of these rescue missions. Or you could consider the possibility that maybe the reason they never found Sam on the mountain is because she's not there to begin with. Now, if you asked her mother, who was named Lisa Sayers, she would start to tell you that she suspected foul play. She even hired private investigators, and she believed that Sam had possibly been abducted or trafficked, and she even said that she held information that proved this. Although for an unknown reason, she went on the record stating that she couldn't share this information. I don't know why. Lisa Sayers also started to cast some suspicion on Kevin. And now it's important to note that Kevin has never been charged with anything in Sam's disappearance, but it is clear that Lisa Sayers was growing more and more desperate by the day to find her daughter, and she was willing to point at anyone and look anywhere, right? And maybe that's a good thing in mysteries like this, you know, it's not really my place to say, but all of this heartbreak and uncertainty clearly caused a strain on the people who loved Sam the most, and Lisa grew convinced that if she was going to find her daughter, she needed to look for answers away from the mountain. I mean, there were so many unanswered questions out there, and as many of you know, when a mysterious case like this one leaves a void, the internet theorists will always find a way to fill it. The Find Sam Sayers Facebook page was created, and it quickly grew to tens of thousands of followers. And then there were these spin-off groups, including some groups that leaned heavily on rumors, we'll say. People were posting tips from psychics. Some swore that they saw bald women at Walmarts all over Washington state. And I'm not even sure how this next one's possible, but one hiker claimed that they saw Sam watching an episode of The Bachelorette on the trail. I don't know, but the bottom line is that people really wanted to find Sam, and they were getting desperate. And these more far-fetched sightings and theories were a clear sign that people were running out of options. And though I'm kind of goofing on them a little bit, you can't really blame them. But actually scratch that, because I can kind of blame them a little bit for this next part. So some people online unfortunately started to pick apart every little one of Kevin's actions, right? A lot of people were suspicious of him. So in one of Kevin's Facebook posts, he referred to Sam as his fiance, which was technically not true. They weren't engaged. And so that kind of raised some alarms for people. But Kevin would go on to say that Sam's family actually agreed that the word fiance kind of better reflected their relationship. People online also took issue with the fact that Kevin went to the trail alone the night that Sam disappeared, without notifying the authorities first. You know, a lot of people thought that it didn't really make sense that Kevin would try to chase after Sam in the dark on a difficult trail with just a cheap flashlight that he bought on the way there. The GoFundMe that Kevin started was an issue with people, as well as, you know, the public nature of the search with a controversial figure like Bud Carr. But the kicker was that the internet really didn't like when they found out that Kevin had returned to the dating apps after some time had passed and Sam was still missing. Now, with that said, it's not like Kevin downloaded Tinder the day after Sam disappeared. Obviously, like, I don't know exactly how much time went by. And honestly, I kind of think that the fingers were being pointed at Kevin simply because he was close to Sam. And in another light, all of those actions simply paint the picture of a man who was desperate to find his girlfriend by any means necessary, and ultimately heartbroken and lonely after his efforts turned up nothing. Kevin spent more than 100 perilous days on Vesper Peak searching for Sam. He worked his ass off, and the online theorists repaid him with suspicion and conspiracy. But despite all of that internet nonsense, Kevin never gave up on Sam, and he also began fighting for other missing hikers as well. Flash forward to October 2019, when a red-headed 28-year-old named Rachel Lackaduck went missing near Hidden Lake Lookout in the North Cascades. The story was strangely similar to the disappearance of Sam Sayers, right? A young, strong female hiker vanishes, an early winter comes, and a family is left praying for some kind of miracle. The county searched for Rachel for 10 whole days, found nothing, and quickly suspended operations. But nearly 2 years after Rachel vanished, one person was still looking. And I'll give you a chance to guess who that person was. Yep, that's right. Our old pal, Bud Carr. He formed a small team of volunteers that bushwhacked through the forest, and Kevin Dares joined them. Now, one part of Kevin genuinely hoped to help find answers for people who have lost loved ones just like he did. And another part of him deep down hoped that his continued searching, you know, just generally, would ultimately lead him back to Sam. And on August 15th, 2021, Kevin was searching the Hidden Lake Lookout area for Rachel when he decided to take a quick break. This is really hard work. He was exhausted, and so he leaned up against a boulder and he lit up a cigarette, which was a bad habit that only got worse after Sam disappeared. Now, though he was resting, he never stopped scanning the landscape around him because, you know, he had trained himself over the years to always be searching. I mean, you're up there, even if you're taking a break, you might as well kind of peek around, right? And so he's doing this, and suddenly he noticed something that just didn't seem right. Kevin saw a tiny rectangle that looked out of place, specifically because it was a bright color that definitely didn't belong in the woods. And so he quickly got on his radio and he called to headquarters and asked, quote, "What color was Rachel's pad, backpack, and sleeping bag?" And someone answered back right away saying, "Green pack, purple bag," and then there was a pause. But not long after that, Bud Carr got on the radio and he added a detail that he'd been holding on for 2 years. Bud said, quote, "She had an orange Thermarest sleeping pad." When he heard that, Kevin's heart sank because he was staring directly at an orange pad that was folded up like a seat. And then he saw a green backpack. And then he found the purple sleeping bag, 2 trekking poles, 2 boots, and then a flash of red hair. Kevin could not believe what he was looking at right in front of him. He hopped back on his radio and he said the line that he had wanted to say for 3 years now, but on a different mountain about a different person. He said, "I've got her." Bud and Kevin clearly made a good team, and the two of them had certainly worked wonders for the family of Rachel Lackaduck. But at the same time, for Kevin, this discovery was very bittersweet, if that makes sense. I mean, he was able to help Rachel's family find closure, but at the same time, he was still desperately searching for that very same thing for himself, when it comes to Sam's case. And he's actually still searching to this day because, and it's heartbreaking to say this, Sam Sayers is still missing. And as if this story wasn't already heartbreaking enough, Lisa Sayers, Sam's mother, passed away just a few months ago in June of 2025 after a long battle with cancer. And she never found the answers that she searched so hard for. And if we ever do find out what truly happened to her daughter, she'll unfortunately never get the peace and possibly the justice that would come from it. And so what the hell could have happened to Sam? Was it foul play like her mother started to believe? And was that foul play committed by someone that she knew or from a complete stranger on the trail? Or did Sam somehow disappear on purpose? I mean, we've talked a lot about theories like this with missing hikers, other missing hikers on this channel. And in Sam's case, there just isn't really a motive that I'm aware of that would back up this theory. But since, we haven't been able to prove anything else with 100% certainty, we can't rule this out as a possibility either. And for what it's worth, if you ask me, I'm still curious about that deep seasonal moat on the north side of Vesper Peak, or even the scattered defunct mines all over the mountain as well. I mean, Sam was hiking all alone, and it would have only taken one wrong step for her to tumble into one of these dark holes, never to be heard from again, which is hard to say, honestly. And look, I know that theory isn't as dramatic as the ones where private investigators are like chasing down abduction leads or online psychics trying to locate Sam from thousands of miles away. I don't know. All I'm saying is that the network of mines that exist all around Vesper Peak just feels so vast and so full of secrets. And I wonder if the answers to Sam's case are at the bottom of just one of those deep, dark pits. But that's pure speculation, nothing more. Until someone finds her, Vesper Peak holds that secret. And until that secret is uncovered, this video is for Lisa Sayers, and it's for Kevin Dares, and of course, it's for Sam Sayers. I hope she's found soon, and please show her some love in the comments section. And also, please join me in donating to the Children's Alopecia Project. Before she passed away, Lisa Sayers encouraged people to donate to that organization in Sam's honor. And so I've made a donation to them, and I'd love it if you join me, even if it's just a few dollars. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I've got their link in the description. YouTube seems to think you'll enjoy watching this video next, and so give it a click, and I will see all of you in the next video.